So imagine you're using a service like Terraform to generate some random passwords, and you want those passwords to be really secure. So you go to the documentation and you go for a length of 16, and you want special characters like all these down here to make sure that password is going to be really difficult to hack and break. And what you do is you eventually save that password into a .m file, and it's a really smart thing to do because that .m file, we don't commit it to source code. We keep it secret in our local environment so we don't spill our secrets into source repository or source code. Now you'll see a problem with that is this $sign. If you're using a service like Docker, for example, which I'll show you, you'll see a problem with this $sign here, and I'll demonstrate that with some code. So this is the problem that we sort of faced with generating random passwords, is that the inclusion of a $sign really screwed things up, and I'll show you why that would be the case. Great, let's have a jump to the code. Now, all the code is going to be available in the Git repository down below. So if you go into the description, the Git repository will be there if you just want to play around yourself, but it is very simple. So let's jump through the code, and you're going to see a few files here. You're probably familiar with it, but I'll just go through it just in case. I do apologize if we're overdoing it, but I've obviously got the Git file for committing things to Git repository. You could ignore to ignore certain things. Here's the M file here. Now, it's a bit unusual that you would commit your M file to your .m file into the source repository. Like I said before, that's where our secrets should be. That's where our passwords should be. So you can imagine like these are our passwords here, and you can probably already tell what's going to go wrong with this $sign here. $sign essentially, what it does, it will take this variable and it will put it inside here. You'll see what I mean when we do it. And essentially, imagine this is your password. So you, for example, the environment variable, which we're going to set to A, should be this, and you want your environment variable B, you want it to be that. And it's really important that it is like that. And the reason we do this is we want to set our password safe. We don't want it to be committed to source repository. We want some sort of package, like which I'll show you. It will take this file here. It will take all these, A, B, and C, and it will set them to environment variables for your program to use. And you want that to be stored locally. You don't want that to commit to source repository, because you can imagine if you have an open source project which is public, people can look at it and they can steal your keys. So you don't want that. That's why we have this service set up here. But as you can see, you'll see why it's so problematic to have $signs, and I'll show you that soon. So that's a .m file. Let's look at some of the guts of what's happening. This is the JavaScript file which we're going to be using to extract our environment variables from the .m file. So we've got that here. We've got this package called .m, which does exactly that. It looks at the .m file, extracts all these values here, and turns them into environment variables for our code to use. And how it does that is we've got this thing called process.m, which gives us access to all our environment variables for whatever environment you're using. So for example, my computer, or what you'll see in the future, is a separate Docker container which just has the environment variables. And you'll see that in this example here, we're going to get process M, and we're going to get it as an object. So you can imagine an object is something like this. If I can learn how to type. So we've got object here, which is essentially set up in like a dictionary in Python, but we're going to have should not be here. And we'll have, just for demonstration purposes, which I think is similar to this. So just got A and B. So you can imagine this is the setup of our environment variables. There's going to be a lot more environment variables in there, but we have that there. And what I want to do is I actually want to apply a filter, because I don't want you to see all the environment variables. I just want you to see the environment variables inside here. And conveniently, these are the only environment variables which have a length of 1. So to do that, we're going to use object.entries, pass it into that. And what object.entries does, it turns this code here into an array of 2. So now we're going to get this is going to be transformed into this here. So A, and this should not be here, and we've got B here too, with this value here. So, whoops, that should be wrapped in an array like this. So we're going to get an array with the key and the value. That's the important thing, is to have the key and the value. So we've got the key here, the value here, and I have it as an array. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this array here. I'm going to pass it into, well, I'm going to apply a filter onto that array. So what this array does here, what this filter does here, this function here, filter takes a callback function. This is a callback function here. It's an arrow function. So we're going really deep into it. I hope I'm not losing anyone, but we can always do something in the future. If you have any questions, please let me know down in the comments. But we have a filter here. And what this filter does, it will take the key. We can also supply value, but it's not really being used in this function here. So we can just take the key, and we look at the length of the key and make sure it's equal to 1. If it's true, it will be kept in the filter. If it's not, it will be dropped. I'm also going to apply a sort here as well. And what the sort does, same thing, it's a callback function. It looks a bit wild, but all it does, it basically looks at if A, for example, if a letter comes before another letter, you give it 1. If it comes after a letter, you give it a -1, and that'll help with the sorting. Now, you'll notice that when we run Node, it'll give it to us in order, but when we use Docker, it won't be in order. So that's why I've had to implement this sort. And what we do in the end is we do an object from entries, which basically turns this back into an object, and we can print that using console log for us to see. So let me just delete this here. We don't need that. And I'll run it. So I'll run it with Node, and you'll see here that we get basically a carbon copy. If I do cat m, we get a carbon copy of our .m file, which is what we expect, because we want, for example, if we had a password that's set to A, which is this should not be here, it should be exactly that. But the problem now lies when we use Docker. So let me spin that instance up. So Docker up and build. You'll see already there's a problem with Z as a variable. Apologies, this is Shivan from the future. I forgot to show you what the Docker files look like. So here they are here. I'll just show you. I'm using my all-time favorite Docker Compose, and what it does, Docker Compose will help build our little Docker file, and it applies the environment variables. It does the extraction of the environment variables for us, turning this M file into an environment variable within that Docker container. And you'll see that here. What the Docker container does, it basically extracts or grabs a node container, pinning it to 18. Alpine just makes it a bit smaller, and we're just copying our index.js and package files, running npm install, basically running Node. Instead of running it on my computer, it's running it inside the Docker container. Now back to the video. Right, so I built that, and you'll see that this is a bit different to what the environment variable is. So if we expect this, if we expect these values here, like we expect I to be this password here, but we end up getting this, which can be a bit annoying. This is the problem that we had, and that's actually really annoying. So a remedy for that is not to have $ in your passwords. But the main reason I think behind it is for things like database URLs, which I hope we're not going into too much detail. Sorry, I'm just gonna have to consult Stack Overflow. But an example is database URLs, like I was saying before. So you've got a database. So some services will take what we call a database URL to connect to a database. However, there are other services that require you to split up that database URL into different components for it to be able to be passed. So you don't want to have those in two different places. You kind of want to have it in one place, which is actually a convenient feature with a $ symbol, because you can sort of import your variables around, despite it being annoying in our situation. So I'm just going to pull up some documentation to have a look at what we can do for this. So for example, with the Docker container for setting up a Postgres database, you need to have, for example, Postgres password. You need to have Postgres user. I think that's the minimum required, and Postgres DB. Postgres DB. I think these are the minimum things you need required for you to spin up an instance. Postgres. And I think we can call this just DB. So essentially, you've got two ways of spinning up a service. You could just do the particular individual environment variables, but then you have to create a database URL. So for example, Prisma uses a database URL, and it's a bit annoying to have two things in two different places. So what you can do is you can have basically Postgres. So this will allow us to connect to the Postgres instance, because remember, we're not using HTTP, we're connecting with its own special kind of unique connection. So connection, I don't know, someone could tell me what it actually is. And we need to provide the user, Postgres user, and we need to provide, I think it's a password comes after that, right? So we $ Postgres password, and at, let's say we're just hosting this locally, so 0.0.0.0 at port 5432. And we need our database, which would be Postgres DB. And if we didn't have the $ symbol, we'll have to type this all out again. So we'll have to be Postgres, and you have to type in the user, which is Postgres. But this could be anything, right? This could be, for example, maybe not that, Shivan. So imagine if I wanted to change a password there, and how annoying it would be. I've got to change this. So Shivan, and you've got Postgres password at 5432 DB. And if I wanted to change, for example, the password here, I've got to change this, got to change it in two places, versus if we have the $ symbol, we can just do it in one place. So that's the reason we have it with Docker, which is actually convenient. So in summary, don't use a dollar sign symbol when you're generating your M files in this scenario and situation, and you'll be fine. So once again, thanks for getting all the way to the end of this video. I hope you didn't find it too kind of boring. I really want to make videos on this where I'm just basically sharing something I've learned, and just want to motivate people and inspire people for people to learn like myself, because I'm learning on this journey. I'm a fresh web developer, been working for 3 months. So I want to share my ideas out there, share learning, small things like this. It keeps me motivated. It's really, really fun. And yeah, I'll be happy to have any feedback. If there's something I missed out, something I need to read up on or learn, please let me know constructively, of course. If you have any questions, the comments below, ask your questions, please. Any feedback is welcome, don't be too mean. And now it's 6:20, so I've got Latin dancing in about half an hour. So I'll probably try and edit this, and we'll see if it's all up. But yeah, thanks. Stay focused and talk soon.